After Snowden came out, we had 15 sweet days of people putting tape over their camera. No. And then right back to whacking off on camera. It's like they forgot all about it.
Common misconception is that Edward Snowden left because of ethical issues, but he just couldn't handle all the dongage.
The fourth time in the last hour.
No, can't be the most free country on earth without removing the freedoms first. Don will be watching men crank it over whatever administration you choose to install. The more we can watch every facet of their life,
the safer they'll be. Oh, it's the fifth time today. Remember that guy at the Capitol riot with the horns on his head? Get a hobby. I wish those were the only horns of his I've seen.
Now, there's a couple people online that have been spreading the conspiracy theory that we're illegally spying on citizens.
Yeah, we are though.
So this is what he looks like. I want you to do a deep dive into his cameras. They don't even vote on it anymore. They just keep giving me more and more access.
A lot of guys working from home these days, which has not been good for me.
Right now, I've got him watching a guy take a dump.
Hey, I've been looking into this woman. She's up to something suspicious. You think I can get the go-ahead to check into it more?
You know what, good idea. I'm gonna take that off your hands. But while I got you here, this guy just bought a pallet of moisturizer, so if you could clear your afternoon, that'd be great.
People think their cameras are off. They're definitely not off.
You know, that's satire, but it's actually true, as NSA agents were caught doing... they were caught... Yeah, YouTube's such a weird place. We can't mention a lot of this stuff. Okay, let's just say making themselves very happy with their own hands through the Pamela Henderson method that were caught at their office doing so to other people's private photos and videos that they sent, not knowing that the government was snooping. I actually confronted the head of the NSA and CIA about this, which you could also see on this channel. Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. This is Luke Rudkowski of WeAreChange.org. Enough monkeying around. In this video, we are going to be talking about the very serious geopolitical news unfolding right now between Vladimir Putin, Russia, going up against the United States, and also, very interestingly, Twitter as well, that looks like they are going to be in some hot water, especially from the latest comments that we have from Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. We're going to get into all of that, plus a lot more, but before we do, the absolutely hilarious clip that we played in the beginning of this broadcast is a short clip from a full video by Ryan Long, which is in the description down below. And he really has a way of using comedy to express a lot of important issues that we should know about, including how the federal government, yes, has been caught watching people grease their monkey. Something, of course, that people should know about, but we absolutely don't because we have a failing mainstream media that does the bidding of the special interest class, rather than, of course, actually do what they say they're going to do and inform the general public. One of the last real forms of journalism we've seen almost 11 years ago when, of course, WikiLeaks and Julian Assange released videos of the reality of the Iraq War, which, of course, was hidden away from the general public. Videos which highlighted how the U.S. government eliminated two Reuters journalists, lied about it, covered up about the events, until, of course, WikiLeaks actually released the evidence of what actually happened, which contradicted the U.S. government's story. For such acts of journalism, Julian Assange has, of course, been sent into exile. He was living in the Ecuadorian embassy. He is now in jail for doing journalism. Meanwhile, now, quote, journalists are trying to make themselves the center of stories as victims. So, as Glenn Greenwald says, quote, they attack marginalized, powerless people, but then pretend the marginalized, powerless, vulnerable ones are themselves, so that it's illegitimate to criticize. And when you look at a lot of the, quote, reporting going on there, you have teams of journalists and investigators looking at individuals that absolutely have no power or can affect anything in your existence at all. Okay, to be fair, maybe some people could inconvenience you slightly, but still, a lot of them are idiots, a lot of them don't have any power, while very powerful groups get to do whatever they want, whether they're the banking corporate class or even the federal government that is more and more trying to take people's civil liberties away, which goes largely unquestioned by, of course, the mainstream media, which usually is cheering it on. Recently, the federal authorities have decided to launch raids on an anonymous safety deposit box facility, forcing customers to reveal their identity to get their stuff back. The TSA that routinely routinely, largely inconveniences a large number of passengers with their security theater, all of course for your safety, have proven to be absolutely useless at doing what they said they were going to do, but they're really great at taking people's own money away from them when they have huge wads of cash in their baggage. This, of course, happens a lot more than you think, including to this elderly man who lost his life savings that was unrightfully taken away from him when he was flying. In other related news of government taking away things that is not theirs, we are also learning that people living in New York City are now paying the highest tax rate in the country, over, of course, a new $4.3 billion tax hike on the citizenry that is footing the bill for ill-advised, absolutely insane policies, along with very big mistakes that were made by the federal government that, of course, are being bailed out by higher tax rates. And even with this $4.3 billion tax hike, along with an additional $12.5 billion from the federal government, from Joe Biden's $1 trillion federal stimulus package, the New York state government still, along with all of that money, draining its citizens dry, getting money from the federal government, still is $15 billion in the hole in their budget deficit. This, of course, is a sign of things to come to the rest of America, which is not only going to have to pay for New York's mistakes, but they themselves are also facing another tax increase, and even, according to Janet Yellen, another corporate tax increase that might even be global if she gets her ways. The federal government is literally maxing out our collective national credit cards, with people not even getting a say where the money goes and not even seeing a drop of it. The people who do get the vast majority of this money are, of course, the special interest class, the multinational powerful banks and corporations that work with the tech oligarchs that are trying to get total supreme power over everyone, which, very interestingly, the mainstream media doesn't see as a very good story. For us, it's a very good story, and that's why as an independent media organization, it's most likely why we're fully demonetized. But because of that, we started to work with good companies that I personally like, that I personally use. One of them is SafePreparedAndReady.com. I would also suggest people, not even for any crisis, but just for their own personal benefit and peace of mind, start growing their own food, start having a small farm. I would also then suggest people get a bag of rice and beans or some kind of storable food. This is just my own personal advice. And then lastly, if you want some of the good premium stuff, check out SafePreparedAndReady.com. I like these guys. I use them when I go hiking. Their food is really good. It's really tasty. It lasts you 25 years. It's some of the best storable food for the value that you could get on, of course, SafePreparedAndReady.com. If you're interested in this product, click the link in the description down below right now to find out more information about them. Also, today on LukeUncensored.com, I have a lot to say about some of the insanity that I can't even address here on this YouTube channel, so stay tuned for even more spicier content later on today after dropping this video on LukeUncensored.com. Now, very interestingly, just a few moments ago, a Supreme Court justice came out in a 12-page letter talking about his concerns with big tech. Concerns that, of course, a lot of people share, and the way that the mainstream media kind of highlights this is, let's just say, very telling to say the least, as, of course, the top article from Google is that, quote, Justice Thomas grumbles over Trump's social media ban. This, of course, after the Supreme Court just vacated a ruling surrounding Trump and his ban from Twitter and Facebook, but this spurred Justice Clarence Thomas to say that social media companies may not have a First Amendment right to regulate speech on their platforms, comparing them to, of course, common carriers and places of public accommodation, which I personally think is a very fair characterization, since, of course, many of these big tech companies are given protection from lawsuits because they're supposed to be free speech platforms. And when they clearly start curating content, when they clearly violate free speech, Justice Thomas is saying, well, maybe then you don't need that free speech protection, since, of course, you're not a free speech platform. And this might be hinting at a major move, which potentially could happen in the future, by the Supreme Court against, of course, Silicon Valley and the big tech monopolies that dominate our public and political discourse in this country and in many other countries around the world. Other countries like Russia, which we're going to be describing in just a little bit, and their fight with Twitter, which is still ongoing. But it's also important to give some context to this story, as of course, Justice Clarence Thomas had a documentary about him censored on Amazon. This, of course, according to the New York Post, that reported how Amazon pulled a Justice Clarence Thomas documentary that was titled Created Equal, Clarence Thomas in his own words, which was removed from Amazon streaming services without even an explanation. Twitter also just recently suspended a U.S. member of Congress, which they just recently came out and said was done in error, after she, of course, posted a tweet about celebrating Easter. Now, will this amount to something? We don't know, but other countries like Russia have also had showdowns with, of course, big tech Silicon Valley companies, including Twitter, which the Russian government even threatened to block in their country if Twitter didn't make steps to block or remove banned content, with Russia specifically also talking about adult content and related adult inappropriate content with children, which was specifically mentioned by Russia, which the Russian government said was creating social harm in their country. They didn't, of course, just highlight the exploitation of children in unspeakable ways. They also talked about the promotion of bad mental health and, of course, of drug sales. Now, it looks like Russia didn't block Twitter outright, but it is trying to curb its influence, but decided to slow down Twitter for users in Russia, which they say they will continue to do until May 15th, and for right now will not be blocking the platform from its country. Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin is definitely not a friend of Silicon Valley and big tech, as of course he previously launched statements comparing big tech as a legitimate threat to democratic institutions. He, of course, is also trying to warn the world about, quote, U.S. big tech dominance, which he said just one day after his first phone call with Joe Biden that, let's just say, was very contentious to say the least. As, of course, Joe Biden keeps blaming Russia for hacks that even the U.S. intelligence agencies say never happened. Now, before we get into some of the more complicated big mess of a situation that's happening between Russia and the United States on the world stage, I think it's fair to say that the rising influence and power by a lot of these big tech companies is something that is becoming more and more apparent, especially even as Supreme Court justices get censored on big tech platforms. And if you can control the information that people can see, you can control the people. Now, are we at that stage? It's debatable, but I think Putin's wariness of big tech is granted, especially the more political these institutions become. And it looks like Putin is codifying his rule in Russia, as today we are also learning that he signed a law that is allowing him to run for 2 more terms in the Kremlin once, of course, his current term ends in 2024, which would allow him to stay in power in Russia up until 2036. And let's be honest here, that is a likely situation and signals more problems geopolitically between the United States and Russia, as of course just a few days ago the Biden administration announced their unwavering support with Ukraine as they were working to intensify their partnership between the United States and Ukraine, trying to, of course, get rid of any Russian influence in that country. This was met by Vladimir Putin deciding to amass his troops and tanks on the Ukrainian border. The European Union decided to also respond by also pledging their, quote, unwavering support for Ukraine during this massive troop buildup, which is having some people speculate if Russia is about to launch a new offensive into Ukraine. This, according to foreignpolicy.com, is putting the Biden team on edge, as according to them, Russia is testing the waters, or, quote, just testing Biden. Now, this is also on the heels of not just a very contested phone call between Biden and Putin, but also Putin on the world stage challenging Joe Biden to an on-air, unscripted debate after, of course, Biden called him a killer. Biden, of course, refused to debate Vladimir Putin on the public world stage, which I would say would be extremely entertaining to see, but also, I bet, extremely informative. Sadly, we will not be seeing that, and now we just have, quote, strategic military movements. As, of course, in the United States, we hear about everything that Russia is doing, their buildup on the Ukrainian border, their latest, quote, their huge amassing and testing of a huge military arsenal in the Arctic, while, of course, the United States and NATO are also amassing their troops and engaging in war games that are meant to, of course, saber rattle back against Russia. You usually don't hear about that news in the Western mainstream media. It's happening both ways, both for troubling developments and just escalations between Russia and the United States, which, if you've been watching this YouTube channel, we've been warning you about and telling you that there will be escalations. The escalations will continue from here. There most likely will be some kind of conflict in Ukraine. I think with the way that things are going, it's only inevitable in the next coming months or years. And honestly, things really don't look too good between the geopolitical situation between Russia and the United States. Russia, which could have been an interesting counterpoint against China, but now is turning towards China, which signals more problems for the United States in the long term. So yeah, that's happening. That's my perspective. If you think I missed anything or got something wrong, let me know what and why in the comment section below. I always really appreciate constructive criticism because without it, I wouldn't be here. I like watching the comments some of the times. I'm focusing a lot of my efforts now on Luke Uncensored, talking to the individuals that actually want to be a part of building this independent media organization, so I apologize that I'm not as active in the chat room as I usually have been. A lot of my efforts are, again, communicating with people on LukeUncensored.com, which I'm going to be there right now as soon as I finish this video. Share this video with your friends and family members. It's more imperative, more important than ever. Without you, I wouldn't be here, and this is why I love you guys. Stay tuned for more here on WeAreChange.org.